Allow me to explain where your flaw lies, Representative. Tom Homan leaned forward, a sly smile resting on his mouth as he gestured toward Jasmine Crockett across the hearing room desk. You have never visited the southern boundary, you have not seen the realities I have encountered, and you have never been forced to retrieve a deceased infant from the Rio Grande, yet you remain in your luxurious office and pass down verdicts upon me. The setting was a House Oversight Committee session focused on border regulation and detention facility oversight. The room was packed to its limits, with media lenses capturing every angle. Homan had consented to appear voluntarily, genuinely eager for the confrontation. Unlike previous individuals who had encountered Crockett and tried to evade her, he actively desired this dispute. Jasmine Crockett remained entirely unfazed. I have observed the pictures of minors confined in the enclosures where you placed them. Homan chuckled, releasing a sincere laugh of entertainment. Why do you refer to them as cages when they are merely wire dividers creating secure holding zones? And certainly I placed them there because their guardians violated the law. Whenever an individual commits an offense within the United States, they are divided from their offspring. So what is the difference here? The difference lies in the fact that those individuals were seeking refugee status, which constitutes a lawful action. Homan reclined in his chair, crossing his arms over his torso while the smile remained clear. It is lawful at an official entry point, but not when crossing illicitly between designated areas. Moreover, I would gladly divide all of them again tomorrow because the tactic was successful. It discouraged unlawful migration, it preserved lives, and if you had any courage, you would concede that I was right. Crockett accessed her first file, her actions seeming composed, systematic, and intentional. Let us review the individuals you assert to have rescued, beginning with those you neglected to save. She extracted an image, a brightly colored copy of a young girl roughly 10 years old, beaming in a classroom portrait. This child is Darlene Cordova Valle, a 10-year-old from El Salvador who was detached from her parent on May 16, 2018, pursuant to your exact directive. Homan offered a dismissive shoulder movement. I cannot recall every isolated situation, given that we handled thousands of individuals. You will absolutely remember this specific instance by the end of today's proceedings. Crockett elevated the photograph, permitting the broadcast lenses to center on it before setting it upright on the surface between them. On the 16th of May, Darlene was removed from her mother's care at the El Paso Processing Center, which was your installation operating under your guidelines. She was held in custody for 3 weeks, during which she reported feeling unwell, experiencing a painful throat, high temperature, and troubled respiration. She brought forth health logs articulating her words deliberately. Between May 17th and June 10th, there were numerous grievances made to personnel and several appeals to visit a doctor. She was given basic pain relievers, and that was the extent of it. Just basic medication for 3 solid weeks. A subsequent paper was produced. On the 10th of June, she was ultimately evaluated by health professionals and determined to have severe streptococcal pharyngitis, for which she received antibiotics, but the intervention arrived too late. A moment of silence ensued. By June 11th, she was discovered unconscious in her holding area and hurriedly transported to the medical center. On the 12th of June, she passed away from blood poisoning caused by the unmanaged throat infection. She was merely 10 years of age. Homan adjusted his posture slightly. That is heartbreaking, yet clinical matters can be incredibly complicated. She pleaded for help over 3 weeks. Your personnel provided her with basic pain relievers, and she perished. You might call it an anomaly, so let us examine exactly how anomalous it truly was. Crockett retrieved a different picture, this time showing a male child donning a blue top, Felipe Alonso Gomez, 8 years of age, hailing from Guatemala, taken from his male parent on the 10th of December 2018. She recited from the chronological record, opting not to exhibit it but merely voicing the details. December 10th, divided. December 20th, began reporting sickness, elevated temperature, and throwing up, yet kept in confinement for 3 extra days despite being ill. On the 23rd of December, he was at last discharged to his father to conserve funds on holding costs. On December 24th, the day before Christmas, he expired in a medical facility in New Mexico. His father cradled him as he died, continuously expressing remorse for having brought him to the United States. Her tone stayed steady and composed, yet the statements landed with profound impact. He perished on the eve of Christmas at 8 years of age, not because your institution lacked the ability to manage his sickness, but because you simply discharged him when his upkeep became too costly. Homan attempted to interject, "Those situations are devastating, but I possess 24 additional examples." She opted against producing all the images, instead simply listing identities, lifespans, and reasons for passing. Carlos Martinez, 7 years of age, perished from the flu while confined, left unmedicated. Maria Gonzalez, 6 years of age, suffered from a lung infection with zero clinical attention for 4 consecutive days. Jose Ramirez, 9 years old, experienced extreme fluid loss, was provided with plain water instead of intravenous liquids, and succumbed. Ana Lopez, 5 years of age, endured a neurological episode with no health workers present, requiring 40 minutes for emergency transport to arrive. Miguel Torres, an 11-year-old, made an effort to end his life in confinement, managing to survive but sustaining profound cognitive trauma. She persisted, delivering additional identities, more lifespans, and further fatalities, refusing to hasten but maintaining a consistent and unrelenting pace. Upon completing the tally, she directed her gaze at Homan. 24 minors perished under immigration enforcement supervision during your time as the leading executive. 24 is not a deterrent. It is sheer dereliction of duty. Homan tilted forward once more. Representative, we managed hundreds of thousands of individuals. Therefore, 24 deceased minors is a tolerable outcome because you handled a massive quantity of human beings? That is not what I am saying. What constitutes the tolerable figure, Mr. Homan? Exactly how many deceased minors amount to a successful deterrent? Provide me with a metric. A quietness descended upon the room. Crockett did not linger for a response, shifting to her subsequent file. Let us converse regarding the individuals who did not perish but continue to endure hardship. 1,401 minors remain separated from their guardians half a dozen years later. She extracted an assessment from the National Security Department. I will quote from it. 1,401 children divided under your directive. For 673, no contact details for the guardians remain. 428 guardians cannot be tracked down despite efforts. 300 guardians are deceased or unaccounted for. She rested the document on the table. You divided them, your bureau lost sight of them, and currently they are fundamentally devoid of parents, not by chance, but due to your protocols. Homan began to articulate a response, but she silenced him. I possess an item here, a directive from the 4th month of 2018 bearing your autograph at the base. She elevated it near enough for his viewing, but distant enough that he was forced to lean inward. It reads, emphasize criminal charges over domestic cohesion. Bringing families back together is not our duty. Concentrate on carrying out the law, end of quote. Those are your phrases and your autograph. She positioned the paper onto the desk. You tore apart thousands of minors without any strategy to bring them back together because reconnecting them was not viewed as your duty. You merely seized them and assumed someone else would manage the fallout afterward. We had procedures established. You possess nothing, no registry, no monitoring network, no collaboration among departments. You merely snatched children away from their parents and wished for the best. Crockett reached beneath the desk, extracted a compact mobile speaker, and set it upon the surface. I desire to broadcast an item, an acoustic capture from June 2018 from within a Frontier Patrol installation in Texas, which was acquired by ProPublica. I intend to broadcast it for a minute and a half. She engaged the playback button. The noise permeated the space. Minors weeping, sobbing, yelling, "Mommy, Mommy, give me my mom, Dad, I want my dad," howling, frantic, terrified tones, some belonging to youths as small as 4, 5, or 6 years of age. The weeping continued relentlessly. A minute and a half seemed interminable. Certain conservative members on the panel appeared uneasy, and a handful averted their eyes. The liberal members remained completely stoic, permitting the audio to run its course. Homan remained stationed there, his arms still crossed, his expression impassive, observing Crockett. The recording concluded. Quietness settled over the space, feeling oppressive and uneasy. That represents your protocol, Mr. Homan. Those are the minors you tore away. That is the noise of deterrence, minors pleading for their guardians. Homan ultimately vocalized a thought. It is deeply moving, I comprehend that, but at the conservative political gathering in the second month of 2023, you stated, and I am citing you exactly, I am entirely exhausted from hearing regarding domestic division. I am still facing litigation over it, and I do not care at all. The core truth is we executed the regulations. She stared directly into his eyes. Therefore, what is the truth? Do you comprehend that it is moving, or do you truly not care at all? Homan's jaw tensed. You were conversing with individuals who back you, who align with you, and you inform them that you do not care at all regarding the division of families. Your statements were documented and distributed. She shut that particular file and accessed a different one. Let us discuss an alternative topic. On the 20th of September 2024, you convened with a pair of corporate figures in Texas. Do you recall that encounter? Homan adjusted his posture a bit, stating, I convene with numerous individuals as boundary protection is. These specific corporate figures were covert federal investigators, and they captured you on visual and acoustic recordings for the whole encounter. His expression altered momentarily, and the sly smile vanished. They masqueraded as leaders from a confinement center corporation, expressing a desire for agreements once the election was won. You informed them that you would serve as the border overseer if the administration shifted, and that you could assist them. Subsequently, you accepted $50,000 in currency from them. She brought forth a record, a federal investigation overview that was heavily censored but displayed crucial segments. The encounter took place in El Paso on September 20th. They arrived with a canvas bag containing $50,000. You accepted it, and you were filmed taking it. The federal authorities initiated an investigation into illicit payouts. Homan reclined backwards. That probe was concluded. The legal department discovered no infractions, and no accusations were brought forward. Indeed, by the newly appointed legal department following the electoral victory, after you were designated as the border overseer, and after you transitioned into one of the most authoritative figures in the government. She produced a chronological breakdown, merely reading it without showing it. September 20th, 2024, you accept the funds. November 5th, the election is won. November 10th, you are declared the border overseer. January 20th, 2025, the inauguration occurs, and a new director assumes control of the Federal Investigative Agency. February 15th, the new director contacts the lead investigator directly to request a progress report on your case. By September, the probe is terminated due to a stated lack of sufficient proof. She paused briefly. You were filmed accepting currency in exchange for pledging state agreements. Then your superior assumed the highest office, and the probe vanished. I was exonerated by the individuals. You operate for those individuals, effectively scrutinizing yourself and declaring yourself guiltless. She lifted an additional record, his mandated economic disclosure document required for all high-ranking state executives. This represents your economic disclosures submitted in March of 2025, a mere 3 months prior, detailing all your holdings and earnings. She flipped through the folios, locating her target. Liquid funds at the conclusion of 2024 were $73,000. By the end of the initial quarter of 2025, they were $120,000. That represents an augmentation of $47,000 over a 3-month span. She raised her gaze to meet his. If there were no infractions, where are the $50,000 the federal agents handed you? You ought to have given it back, declared it to the officials, or submitted it as proof. Instead, your liquid funds swelled by $47,000 immediately after you accepted the $50,000. So where did those funds end up? Homan shifted uncomfortably. I supplied lawful advisory operations to covert federal agents masquerading as corporate figures. What sort of advisory operations did you supply to fabricated individuals? I was unaware they were federal agents. Precisely. You believed they were legitimate corporate figures, so you accepted their funds and pledged them agreements, which is defined as a corrupt payment. I documented it as advisory revenue. You documented a corrupt payment as advisory revenue, which constitutes deception. Regardless of how you frame it, you executed an illegal act. She did not delay for his reaction, pressing onward. Let us examine who else compensated you. The GEO Group, you are familiar with them. They represent a private confinement corporation, the biggest private incarceration firm in the nation. They operate immigration holding centers and compensated you with a minimum of $500,000 in advisory payments between 2023 and 2025 while you were separate from the government. Is that accurate? Advising is a lawful practice. Following that, you assumed the role of border overseer in November 2024, and you asserted that you severed ties with all advisory partnerships to prevent ethical clashes. Is that accurate? Affirmative. On what exact date did you sever ties with the GEO Group specifically? Sometime in November. Sometime in November following what event? After my appointment as border overseer was announced in mid-November. Consequently, you were aware you were assuming the role of border overseer, and you severed ties to prevent ethical clashes, which is highly accountable. She paused, then asked, "Then for what reason did the GEO Group compensate you $15,000 in January 2020?" She displayed a financial institution record bearing his title at the crest and a highlighted transfer. January 15th, 2025, an influx from the GEO Group of $15,000 with a note stating advisory operations for January 2025, indicating current month operations, not previous efforts. Homan stumbled over his words, saying, "That constituted deferred remuneration from..." The note specifies January 2025, meaning current. You were the border overseer, and they compensated you while you held public office. Subsequently, a single month later in February 2025, the GEO Group secured a federal agreement worth $870 million for confinement centers at Fort Bliss. She lowered the financial record and lifted the agreement notification. You accepted $15,000 from an enterprise while operating as the border overseer, and a month later that same enterprise secured an $870 million agreement from the department you manage. That does not constitute advising, that represents an illicit reward. I did not finalize that procurement determination. You supervised the entirety of immigration confinement, you established the directives, and you identify the requirements. You unequivocally swayed that agreement. She brought out additional paperwork. USA Upstart Tent Company likewise compensated you with advisory payments in 2024 and similarly secured a spot on the sanctioned supplier registry in 2025, landing one agreement valued at $300 million. Industrial Tent Systems followed an identical sequence. They compensated you and were subsequently authorized for agreements. Charles Soil Contractor compensated you, and his patrons gained entry to the sanctioned registry. She aligned the documents methodically. You provided counsel for enterprises that construct confinement enclosures, then assumed the role of border overseer, and thereafter those enterprises secured billions in agreements to construct the enclosures where you hold migrants. You are financially benefiting from confinement. I severed my ties. You accepted funds while holding office, which we have merely demonstrated, and even if you severed ties nominally, you benefited financially prior to assuming the position. You amassed millions assisting enterprises in aligning themselves for agreements, then awarded them those very agreements. Whether it is lawful or otherwise, it is fundamentally corrupt. Crockett transitioned to a separate file. On the 15th of March 2025, a national magistrate issued a decree to halt all removals to El Salvador pending an assessment. Your department obtained that decree. My judicial personnel managed judicial decrees. Your autograph appears on the confirmation of receipt. She elevated the paper, magnifying the signature section. Thomas D. Homan, inscribed on March 15, 2025 at 2:47 in the afternoon. You personally confirmed obtaining a national judicial decree halting removals to El Salvador. She set it down and lifted a different paper. This is an aviation manifest for a private journey from El Paso to San Salvador with a departure hour of 4:15 in the afternoon on March 15th, the exact same day. The succeeding document shows a secondary journey at 4:30 in the afternoon on the exact same day. A total of 214 individuals were removed to El Salvador in clear defiance of a national judicial decree. She extracted a printed electronic message emphasizing specific sections. This is an electronic message from your profile, dispatched at 3:30 in the afternoon on March 15th to operational teams with the heading El Salvador journeys continue with planned removals, do not postpone. End of quote. She locked eyes with him, allowing the reality to settle. You authorized the judicial decree at 2:47 in the afternoon, and 43 minutes afterward you directed your personnel to advance regardless. An hour and a half following your authorization, a pair of aircraft departed. You did not merely disregard the judicial decree, you openly rebelled against it intentionally and consciously. Homan articulated the judicial evaluation was complicated. Did you authorize the confirmation of receipt? Affirmative, however. Did you transmit the directive to continue with removals following your authorization? He paused, then responded, affirmative. Consequently, you consciously violated a national judicial decree, which constitutes disrespecting a tribunal, and that represents an illegal act. She withdrew another instance. In January 2026, a national magistrate in Minnesota commanded the discharge of an individual in custody. Your department failed to obey. The magistrate warned they would hold the acting chief in contempt, yet you continued to refuse the discharge until the magistrate was on the verge of issuing an apprehension order. File after file, distinct matters, distinct tribunals, yet an identical sequence. You do not believe judicial decrees pertain to you. You believe you exist above the statutes. Homan leaned forward, adopting a protective stance. We function within complicated judicial structures. You function outside the statutes because you believe immigration execution holds greater significance than judicial commands. You have stated exactly that, quoting, "Magistrates fail to comprehend the boundary. I do." Those were your statements during a media broadcast just last month. She shut that file and observed him for an extended period. Previously, you stated you are unaware of singular situations, that you managed thousands of individuals, and that you are incapable of remembering everyone. She rose to her feet and strolled toward the rear of the gathering space where the onlookers were seated. I desire to summon an individual to testify, Maria Santos. A female in her mid-30s arose, petite and anxious, proceeded to the testimony desk and took a seat beside where Crockett had been positioned. Crockett remained on her feet. Ms. Santos kindly informed the panel regarding the events of June 5, 2018. Maria conversed in English, lacking an interpreter, with a minor inflection. I arrived at the boundary with my boy Miguel, who was 6 years of age. We were petitioning for refuge from Guatemala due to syndicate hostility, as they had murdered my spouse, and we arrived here seeking protection. Her vocal tone trembled slightly. They transported us to an installation in McAllen, Texas, where they divided us and removed Miguel from my care. I was clutching him while he wept, and I pleaded with them, saying, "Kindly do not remove him, please," pleading in English so they would comprehend. She directed her gaze at Homan. You were present. Homan's expression revealed nothing as he stated, "I do not remember." You strolled directly past us. I pleaded with you specifically, you observed me, and you stated that you ought not to have transported him here, and then you continued strolling. They removed my boy. I have visited numerous installations, and I fail to recall specific. Maria took out her mobile device and displayed it to the panel, revealing an image on the display. I captured this on June 5, 2018 at 3:17 in the afternoon. The picture depicted the interior of a confinement installation featuring wire dividers with families trapped behind them, and in the distance traversing the installation, Tom Homan was unmistakably visible with a time marker in the corner. You were present, you observed us, you listened to me plead, and you strolled off. They removed my boy, and I did not lay eyes on him for a period of 4 months. She was shedding tears at this point. When I ultimately received him back, he refused to speak for half a year. He was profoundly terrified, believing I had abandoned him and assuming I no longer desired him. She dried her eyes. He is currently 12 years old and continues to suffer from night terrors every single evening, awakening in tears and believing he has returned to that location. You caused that, not the syndicates, not the travel. You took my boy to penalize me for requesting assistance. Crockett allowed the quietness to linger, then conversed in a low tone. Mr. Homan, you stated you fail to remember singular situations, yet Ms. Santos remembers you. She possesses a picture verifying you were present, that you listened to her plead, and that you elected to take no action. She proceeded back to her chair. Your justification was you lacked knowledge, however, you possessed knowledge. You were present, you observed, you listened, and you proceeded regardless. Homan offered no reply. The picture was irrefutable, and his entire justification of lacking knowledge regarding singular situations simply crumbled. He was present, he observed, and he made a choice. Crockett brought forth an additional record. I desire to display an additional item, an internal dispatch from the Alamogordo installation dated December 2018, submitted by health personnel. She recited deliberately, quote, minor 8 years of age, Felipe Alonso Gomez reported elevated temperature and throwing up to Officer Martinez at 900 hours. Officer Martinez alerted Supervisor Chen, and Supervisor Chen declared, Chief Homan is touring the installation today at 1400 hours. Do not disrupt with trivial health matters. Advised to provide the minor with basic pain relievers and observe. End of quote. She glanced up at him. You were touring that installation on December 22nd, the exact day prior to Felipe's passing, and your personnel explicitly refrained from contacting a physician because of your presence and their desire to avoid disruption. She extracted a guest registry bearing his autograph at the base. You registered your arrival at 2:47 in the afternoon and walked through the installation for 60 minutes. She set a picture onto the desk, an image from a surveillance device bearing a time marker of December 22nd, 2018 at 3:47 in the afternoon. The image depicted a corridor with Homan walking, and in the distance, clearly observable on a seat, was a minor sitting with his head lowered, visibly suffering. That is, Felipe, a mere 5 feet away from you. You strolled directly past him. On December 22nd at 3:47 in the afternoon, you passed him, and he perished the subsequent day. She allowed the picture to remain there, permitting everyone to observe it. Homan strolling past a perishing minor and taking no action. You were present, you observed him, he was noticeably ill, and you strolled past, and subsequently he perished. Homan gazed at the picture, unable to refute it, his visage, the time marker, the minor in the distance. His secondary justifications similarly crumbled. Not only was he aware of singular situations, but he had physically strolled past a perishing minor and taken absolutely no action. Crockett advanced further. Previously during this session, Representative Jordan inquired if you had convened with any radical or prejudiced organizations. You responded negatively, asserting you solely convene with law enforcement specialists. Does that remain your sworn statement? Homan nodded affirmatively, stating, affirmative. She brought out an image showing Homan gripping hands with an additional individual, both beaming, with the setting revealing a conference area. This individual is Terry Newsom, a recognized organizer for the Proud Boys, whom the Southern Poverty Law Center categorizes as a radical. This picture dates back to February 15, 2025 in Chicago. I am not aware of the political ties of every person. She placed an additional picture on the table, showing the exact same pair at a distinct time, seated at a desk with papers scattered before them, unmistakably engaged in a professional conference. You convened with him on 2 occasions in February, in Chicago and Phoenix. She produced his formal schedule, acquired via a public records request from his bureau, and placed it upon the desk. Your state schedule contains an entry for February 15th that states, Conference with T. Newsom concerning removal operations. The entry for February 23rd states, Subsequent conference with T. Newsom in Phoenix. She observed him closely. You convened with Terry Newsom on 2 official occasions, which your schedule corroborates, and you conversed about removals. I lacked knowledge that he was. She retrieved a portable electronic device, engaged the playback function, and the acoustic recording commenced. Homan's vocal tone was distinct and easily identifiable. Terry, you are accomplishing fantastic efforts. True loyalists comprehend the incursion we are encountering, and we require additional individuals like you voicing the facts. She halted the acoustic recording. That is your voice on Terry Newsom's broadcast, Patriots Rising, in October 2024, a broadcast that advances Caucasian supremacy. You appeared as a visitor, you commended him, and you employed the term incursion, which represents Caucasian supremacist language. She rested the electronic device down. You declared under a solemn vow 30 minutes prior that you have never convened with radical organizations. I just exhibited images confirming you convened with a recognized Proud Boys organizer on 2 official occasions, as corroborated by your schedule, and you featured on his radical broadcast commending his efforts. She paused, allowing the reality to settle in. That constitutes false testimony, Mr. Homan, fabricating facts under a solemn vow before the legislature, which is a major criminal offense. His visage turned crimson while his legal representative was scribbling frantically. Homan parted his lips, then shut them, lacking any justification. The images were authentic, the schedule was formal, and the acoustic recording was undeniably his tone. He had just been ensnared fabricating facts under a solemn vow. His tertiary primary justification crumbled. It was not an error nor an act of forgetting, but a purposeful fabrication under a solemn vow regarding a matter that was effortlessly verifiable. Crockett permitted the quietness to persist, letting everyone digest what had merely occurred. The border overseer had fabricated facts to the legislature under a solemn vow concerning conferences with Caucasian supremacists. Following that, she progressed. I desire to summon an additional individual to testify at this time. The committee had nodded in agreement. Maria Santos returned, the female who had spoken earlier and displayed the image of Homan strolling past her in McAllen, yet this time she possessed additional information to share. Saudsana, Miss Santos, you informed us regarding the instant of division. Kindly inform us what occurred subsequently. Maria inhaled deeply, her hands trembling to a minor degree. They transported my boy to a separate structure while I was handled and placed in confinement. I inquired daily regarding his location, yet no one would provide me with answers. For 3 weeks, I possessed 0 details. Her vocal tone wavered, yet she persevered. Ultimately, a watchman informed me he was located in Arizona, specifically Phoenix. I remained in Texas, yet they had transported him midway across the nation. I inquired how I might contact him via telephone, and they replied with a negative, 0 telephone contact, 0 communication. She paused briefly. I failed to hear my boy's tone for 4 months, lacking knowledge if he was well, if he was harmed, or if he was breathing. Tears were flowing now, which he quickly brushed aside. Upon our eventual reconnection, he failed to recognize me initially. 4 months had passed, he was 6 years of age, and he had forgotten my appearance. She brought out a secondary image, a current one of her boy, now an adolescent. He is currently 14 years old, 8 years have elapsed, and he still occasionally questions me, "Are you intending to abandon me?" He still harbors that terror that I will vanish once more, because for 4 months from his viewpoint, I genuinely did vanish. She looked directly at Homan. You caused that, not the criminal syndicates, not the travel, you, your protocol, your decision. You divided us, and 8 years later, my boy continues to question if I am going to abandon him. She resumed her seat, and the space remained silent, with multiple committee figures appearing visibly distressed and one Liberal member weeping softly. Crockett summoned the subsequent individual to testify, presenting an additional visual testimony from a female, this time in her early 30s, conversing from a space with gentle illumination and a formal arrangement, likely a counselor's office. My identity is Carmen. I was divided from my pair of daughters in June 2018 when they were 4 and 7 years of age. Her vocal tone was unwavering yet strained, as though she had recounted this narrative countless times, though it never became simpler. I remained in confinement for 6 weeks prior to discovering their location, Chicago. I resided in Texas, yet they had shipped my 4-year-old and 7-year-old to Chicago unaccompanied. She lowered her gaze, then returned it to the lens. When I finally regained custody of them, the youngest refused to speak for 3 months. The counselor diagnosed her with selective silence triggered by distress. She had been conversing normally previously, but following 6 weeks in confinement divided from me, she ceased entirely. She paused. She is currently 11 years old and converses once more, yet she suffers from anxiety episodes if I depart the area without informing her of my destination, if I am delayed in collecting her from her educational institution, or if I fail to answer the telephone instantly, she becomes frantic, assuming I have vanished. Tears were currently cascading down her visage. That represents the consequence of your protocol, Mr. Homan. My female child was 4, she is 11 currently, 7 years have elapsed, and she continues to suffer from anxiety episodes because you removed me from her presence. The visual recording concluded. Crockett refrained from speaking right away, permitting the testimony to linger and allowing everyone to comprehend its gravity before stating softly, 7 years have elapsed, and they are continuing to endure hardship. That represents the deterrent. Homan attempted to interject, those situations are devastating. They are absolutely not devastating. Devastating implies a mishap, an environmental catastrophe, or something inevitable. These represent the outcomes of your decisions, your protocol, and your execution. She withdrew additional paperwork, specifically cognitive evaluations from confined minors. These represent cognitive wellness appraisals from minors divided under your protocol, executed by the Health and Human Services Department, mandated by a judicial decree following reconnection. She recited from the papers, with identities censored and only lifespans and clinical determinations visible. Boy, age 6, profound distress, bonding disorder, post-trauma stress. Girl, age 5, melancholy, selective silence, rest disruption. Boy, age 8, post-trauma stress disorder, anxiety condition, self-harm thoughts. She continued reciting, progressing through folio after folio, minor after minor, female 7, male 4, female 9, male 6, dozens of instances, all identical. Distress, post-trauma stress disorder, bonding disorders, rest complications, and conduct abnormalities. She ceased reading and raised her gaze. These are not mere stories. This represents systemic cognitive damage verified by state physicians and generated by state protocol, specifically your protocol. The guardians comprehended the hazards. These minors lacked comprehension of the hazards. They were 4, 5, and 6 years of age. They did not elect to arrive here. They possessed no understanding of immigration protocols. They merely grasped that their guardians vanished. She shut the cognitive wellness documents and brought forth an additional paper. This originates from the American Academy of Pediatrics, composed in June 2018 and dispatched directly to you. She held it high, displaying the formal stationery directed to Thomas D. Homan, serving chief. Quote, dividing families generates irreversible detriment to the maturation of minors. The distress of division can result in enduring cognitive damage. We strongly recommend the instant termination of this protocol signed by upward of 15,000 child specialists. She placed the item onto the desk. 15,000 medical professionals informed you this was detrimental to the wellness of minors, to their maturation, and to their cognitive state, yet you disregarded them. That represents their perspective. They are medical professionals, child specialists, and youth maturation authorities, and you disregarded 15,000 of them because you harbored a hypothesis regarding deterrence. She lifted the cognitive wellness records once more. They proved accurate. Every evaluation displays detriment, distress, melancholy, post-trauma stress disorder, and bonding disorders precisely as the medical professionals foresaw and precisely as they cautioned you. She paused. You received warnings that it would harm minors, yet you proceeded regardless. That does not constitute rigorous enforcement. That constitutes purposeful damage. She organized all the paperwork together, testimonies, cognitive wellness reports, and medical cautions, assembling them into a single pile. These do not represent figures. These represent minors possessing identities, possessing visages, and carrying distress that will endure for their whole existences. She directed her gaze at Homan. Maria's boy questions if she intends to abandon him, Carmen's girl experiences anxiety episodes, and Carlos endures night terrors, all because you determined that brutality constituted an effective protocol. Homan lacked a reply. What could he possibly articulate? The proof was staggering, clinical, cognitive, and experiential, all indicating the identical reality. His protocol had methodically damaged thousands of minors, he had received warnings it would occur, and he had proceeded regardless. Crockett aligned all the papers, allowed them to rest there, and then looked at him an additional time. During the entirety of this session, you have asserted that you would repeat the entire process, that you were correct, that dividing families was an effective protocol, and that it preserved lives. Homan nodded in a rebellious manner, affirmative because it was successful. You continuously assert it preserved lives. Provide me with a metric, precisely how many lives did dividing families preserve? A quietness descended. You have stated it numerous times that it preserved lives, therefore inform me of the quantity, 100,000, 10,000. I do not possess a precise metric, an estimate, a general range, an order of magnitude. Precisely how many lives were preserved by tearing apart 5,000 minors. I am unable to measure it. However, you possess the ability to measure the damage. 24 minors deceased in confinement, 1,401 still divided from guardians, thousands bearing verified cognitive distress, post-trauma stress disorder evaluations, and self-harm efforts. Those are entirely quantifiable. She tilted forward slightly. You imposed quantifiable hardship upon thousands of minors, and you rationalized it by asserting it preserved lives, yet you never quantified the advantage, never monitored it, and never even made an effort to measure it. She paused. You tore apart families predicated on a hypothesis that brutality would serve as a deterrent, yet you possess zero information proving it was successful, zero proof demonstrating lives preserved, and absolutely nothing. Another pause followed. That fails to qualify as a protocol. That is merely brutality, and you are entirely unable to prove it achieved a single thing. Homan lacked a reply because she was accurate. He had never quantified the deterrent impact, never monitored the advantage, and never verified his protocol was successful. He merely assumed it was and behaved according to that assumption, generating quantifiable damage for an unquantifiable advantage. His concluding justification crumbled, not due to proof brought against him, but due to his personal absence of proof. He had damaged thousands of minors and was wholly unable to prove it achieved a single thing. Crockett shut her files, all of them, and aligned them methodically. I have displayed proof this day. 24 minors who perished while under your supervision, 1,401 still divided from their guardians, $50,000 in currency that you accepted from federal investigators, and $15,000 you acquired from the GEO group while operating as the border overseer. Additionally, I presented enterprises you advised that secured billions in agreements, national judicial decrees you personally signed and subsequently violated, testimony you provided under a solemn vow concerning radical conferences that was revealed to be untrue, and a protocol you assert preserved lives yet are unable to prove preserved a single individual. She directed her gaze at the panel, at the broadcasting lenses, and at the official log. Mr. Homan stated at the commencement of this session that he would repeat the entire process, and that I lacked the courage to concede he was correct. She directed her gaze back toward him. I assert you have demonstrated you ought never to have executed it initially, and the singular item you are correct regarding is that you would execute it again because you have displayed zero ability to acquire knowledge, zero readiness to concede a mistake, and zero regret for the hardship you generated. She relinquished her allotted duration. The space erupted, with conservatives attempting to rationalize and liberals demanding answerability. Homan remained seated there, cornered, furious, yet incapable of fleeing. Every justification was annihilated, every rationalization was chronicled, every falsehood was uncovered, and every validation had crumbled. He had strolled in self-assured and smiling slyly, prepared to engage in conflict. He departed vanquished by his personal autograph, his personal statements, his personal image strolling past a perishing minor, and his personal failure to verify his protocol was successful. A fortnight following the session, the panel cast a ballot on a criminal suggestion advising the legal department to probe Tom Homan for defying a tribunal, fabricating facts, corrupt payments, deception, and jeopardizing minors. The ballot followed partisan boundaries. Liberals voted affirmatively, conservatives voted negatively, aside from 4 conservatives who voted affirmatively. They refused to elaborate in an open forum, yet privately their aides communicated the identical message to journalists. The image of him strolling past that perishing youth, we are unable to rationalize that. The criminal suggestion was transmitted to the legal department, the president's legal department, and it progressed absolutely nowhere, which everyone anticipated, yet it was recorded, open to the public and everlasting. Tom Homan, the border overseer, criminally suggested by the legislature. The private litigation arrived more rapidly than any individual anticipated. The initial one was from the Civil Liberties Union, submitted 3 weeks following the session on behalf of all 1,401 minors still divided, functioning as a collective action naming Tom Homan individually as the accused, pursuing 3 specific demands: state finance counseling for all impacted minors, aggressive reconnection efforts, and financial penalties, specifically personal financial penalties leveled against Homan. The legal grievance was ruinous, comprising 140 folios, with every divided minor chronicled by their primary identity and age, every verified detriment listed, and every unsuccessful reconnection effort noted, while attached as the primary exhibit was Maria Santos's image showing Homan strolling past her on June 5, 2018, possessing a time marker proving his presence and proving his awareness. The relatives of the 24 deceased minors submitted their paperwork subsequently, 24 distinct unlawful fatality lawsuits, each one citing Tom Homan individually. Darlin's parent initiated a lawsuit for clinical dereliction of duty, and the grievance incorporated the installation records displaying 3 weeks of ignored grievances. Felipe's parent initiated a lawsuit for purposeful neglect, and the grievance incorporated the occurrence log detailing personnel being instructed not to disrupt Homan's tour with clinical matters. While attached to Felipe's grievance was the surveillance device image showing Homan strolling past the perishing minor on December 22, 2018, mere hours prior to his demise. The judicial approach was evident. Do not merely initiate a lawsuit against the department, initiate a lawsuit against him individually, forcing him to respond for precise minors, precise fatalities, and precise decisions. A single lawsuit incorporated a comprehensive chronological breakdown, minute by minute, of the day Felipe perished. 9 in the morning, Felipe reports an elevated temperature to Officer Martinez. 9:15 in the morning, Officer Martinez alerts Supervisor Chen. 9:30 in the morning, Supervisor Chen asserts, "Chief Homan is touring today. Do not disrupt." 2:47 in the afternoon, Homan registers his arrival at the installation. 3:47 in the afternoon, the surveillance device displays Homan strolling past Felipe. 4:30 in the afternoon, Homan departs the installation. 6 in the evening, Felipe's status deteriorates. 8 in the evening, Felipe is hurriedly transported to the medical center. 11:47 at night, Felipe is declared deceased. The chronological breakdown was harrowing because it highlighted a decision. Personnel possessed knowledge that Felipe was ill, elected not to summon a physician due to Homan touring, and Homan strolled directly past him, constituting a decision, not dereliction of duty, but a decision that was chronicled, clocked, and photographed. Homan enlisted costly legal representatives and commenced combating the lawsuits, submitting requests for dismissal, citing protected status, arguing he was obeying directives and claiming an absence of personal answerability, yet the proof rendered those rationalizations challenging. His autograph appeared on the execution directive, his physical self was located at the installation, his image showcased him strolling past perishing minors, and his financial accounts displayed influxes from confinement corporations. He was unable to assert he lacked knowledge, as the images confirmed he possessed it. He was unable to assert he was unassociated, as his autograph confirmed he was associated. He was unable to assert an absence of personal gain, as his financial records confirmed he benefited financially. The lawsuits would require years to resolve, a fact everyone grasped, yet they were open to the public, with every submission reachable via the internet, every fragment of proof readable, and journalistic entities reporting on all of them. The grievance directed at Homan concerning Felipe's passing garnered 5 million hits on the internet, while the image of him strolling past the perishing minor gained massive traction once more as individuals proved incapable of ceasing their dissemination of it. The brutality was profoundly observable, profoundly chronicled, and profoundly irrefutable. He endeavored to continue laboring, continue participating in broadcasts, and continue rationalizing. I was accurate, dividing families was successful, and I would execute it again, yet everywhere he journeyed, relatives trailed him. At a conservative broadcasting studio in Manhattan, he arrived for an evening program, prepared to rationalize his history and elaborate on his protocols. Out in the open, 10 female parents stood clutching pictures, remaining entirely mute in a formation. Protection personnel attempted to relocate them, stating, "You must evacuate the pedestrian path," yet they were stationed on the pedestrian path, which constituted public terrain, obstructing absolutely nothing, merely stationed there while clutching pictures. Homan's vehicle arrived. He observed them. His facial expression tensed. He exited hastily and he strode rapidly in the direction of the doorway. A single female parent moved ahead, displaying no hostility, merely making her presence known. "Mr. Homan, I am Jennifer. You divided me from my female child in May 2018 when she was 4, and her identity is Sophia." She elevated the picture, depicting a young female child, 4 years of age, wearing a rose-colored garment, possessing terrified eyes. "She is 12 currently and suffers from anxiety episodes, believing I will abandon her because you removed me from her presence." Homan persisted in his stride, offering no reply, proceeding into the structure, yet broadcasting lenses captured the moment, a parent conversing, him neglecting her while she clutched the picture. The visual recording gained massive traction, titled "Homan Neglects Divided Parent at Conservative Broadcast," amassing 30 million hits, while the remarks surged, "He refuses to even cast a glance at her. She remained incredibly polite. He merely strolled past that young female child in the picture. She is 12 currently and continues to endure hardship." At a conservative gathering a fortnight subsequently, a Dallas immigration protocol panel featured Homan as the principal presenter, and he arrived ahead of schedule, with prepared statements ready to rationalize his history to an endorsing crowd. The banquet space accommodated 800 individuals, and he entered for a volume check, observing the initial 3 tiers, relatives numbering 40 individuals, all seated silently, all clutching pictures. His principal aide drew near, stating, "Sir, we possess the authority to have them evacuated." Homan observed them, observed the pictures, observed the visages of minors glaring at him, and inquired, "Based on what justification? They possess entry passes, they are causing no disruption, and they pose no protective hazard." Homan pondered the situation, recognizing broadcasting lenses were omnipresent. If he evacuated relatives clutching pictures of their offspring, that would become the narrative. Homan evicts divided relatives. He shifted his head side to side and said, "Allow them to remain." The address proceeded, featuring Homan at the stand, rationalizing family division, elaborating on deterrence, and validating the protocol, while 40 relatives populated the initial tiers, remaining mute, merely clutching pictures and observing him. Whenever he articulated an argument, an individual in the initial tier would elevate their picture higher, refraining from speaking, refraining from disrupting, merely guaranteeing he was able to observe it. He attempted to concentrate on the remainder of the audience, the endorsers, the individuals signaling agreement, yet his gaze continuously wandered to the forefront, to the pictures and to the visages. A solitary female, roughly 50 years old and of Guatemalan descent, clutched an image of a boy perhaps 7 years of age. She was not shedding tears, was not exhibiting fury, she was merely observing him, compelling him to look. He concluded the address, which was more abbreviated than scheduled, fielded a reduced number of inquiries, and departed hastily, yet visual recordings of the gathering displayed the entirety, him conversing, the relatives remaining mute, the pictures remaining observable, and his unease being palpable. This resulted in an additional massively viewed instance, titled Divided Relatives Challenge Homan at Gathering, securing 20 million hits. Eatery meetings transformed into commonplace events. At a capital city meat establishment, he was consuming an evening meal with his personnel, mapping out the subsequent stage of removals when a male parent drew near to the booth. The man was in his mid-40s, of Mexican descent, neatly attired and polite. "Pardon me, Mr. Homan, I apologize for the disruption. My identity is Roberto, and you divided me from my boy in June 2018 at the Brownsville installation when he was 6. He extended his mobile device, displaying an image on the screen depicting the parent and boy prior to the division, followed by a secondary image of the boy currently at 14, possessing distressed eyes. This represents his current state. He refuses to trust me any longer and believes I will vanish. Your protocol caused that." Homan's personnel began to rise, and nearby protection individuals tightened their postures. Roberto elevated his palms. "I am not present to engage in conflict, merely to display his visage to you and demonstrate what it inflicted upon him." He rested the mobile device on the booth, leaving the image of his boy observing Homan. "I merely desired you to observe that, and that is the entirety of it." He strolled away, returning to his personal booth where his spouse remained seated. Homan observed the mobile device, observed the picture, and observed the adolescent's eyes. An individual from a distinct booth was recording the event, and predictably it disseminated everywhere, titled "Parent Displays Image of Damaged Boy to Homan," achieving 15 million hits. These meetings persisted in occurring, spanning distinct municipalities and distinct settings, yet constantly featuring the identical elements: guardians, pictures, narratives, compelling him to observe, devoid of fury, devoid of hostility, yet merely unyielding, inescapable, and omnipresent. At a caffeine vendor in Phoenix, an aviation hub in Atlanta, or an accommodation reception area in Miami, guardians arrived equipped with pictures, possessing identities, and possessing visages. "This constitutes my female child. You divided us when she was 5, she is 13 currently, and she continues to endure night terrors. This constitutes my boy. We were apart for 4 months when he was 7. He is 15 currently, and he refuses to trust a single soul. This constitutes my youth. You remove them, and they continue to suffer. This occurred continuously, ubiquitously, and inescapably." His personnel began advising him, suggesting relatives were positioned externally and recommending the utilization of a rear access point. However, relatives were consistently stationed at every access point, every departure point, and every pathway, abstaining from obstructing, abstaining from intimidation, merely existing, remaining present, observing, and rendering it unfeasible to ignore, to progress past, or to feign it had not occurred. His personal relatives commenced pulling away. His female child published on internet platforms, employing cautious phrasing yet remaining unambiguous. Minors ought never to be divided from guardians as a penalty. Domestic units are inviolable. His male sibling, a former law enforcement officer, granted a regional broadcast an interview. "I endorse law execution that safeguards individuals, yet I cannot endorse protocols that damage domestic units." He refrained from naming Tom directly as it was unnecessary, given that everyone understood. Support organizations constructed an internet destination titled Visages of Division, featuring all 1,401 minors, complete with pictures, identities, lifespans, narratives, the locations of their division, their current locations, and their recollections. Located at the base of every profile was the phrasing, divided by Tom Homan's protocol. The destination garnered millions of views, journalistic entities directed traffic toward it, educational institutions utilized it for instructional purposes, and it transformed into the enduring chronicle. 1,401 visages entirely linked to his identity for eternity. During a political assembly 6 months subsequently, Homan received an invitation to deliver an address. The president commended him, labeling him a loyalist and a champion, prompting the audience to applaud enthusiastically. Homan approached the stand, continuing to appear self-assured and rebellious. They attempted to ruin me, the legislature, the press, and support organizations, yet I remained present because I was correct. Dividing families was successful, it preserved lives, and I would execute it again tomorrow. The audience indoors erupted loudly as his core supporters adored his statements. Externally, 200 relatives stood waiting, holding pictures, holding small flames, and remaining mute, while regional broadcast entities displayed the events simultaneously on a divided display. On the left side, Homan stood at the stand stating, "I would execute it again," maintaining he was correct. On the right side, female parents stood clutching pictures of divided minors, some shedding tears, all remaining mute. The visual recording gained massive traction, securing 40 million hits, as the juxtaposition proved ruinous. His arrogance set against their anguish, positioned parallel to one another. Remarks surged. "He takes pride in damaging youths. Observe the visages of those female parents." He declared he would repeat the process, which reveals the entirety of what you require understanding. Even certain conservatives chimed in, "I endorse boundary protection, yet this crosses a line." Jasmine Crockett received an invitation to deliver remarks on the legislative floor. A quarter of a year prior, I presented proof regarding Tom Homan's operations: 24 minors deceased, 1,401 still divided, illicit payments, judicial decrees violated, and false testimony. She paused briefly. He declared he would repeat the entire process and that he was correct, which reveals the entirety of what you require understanding. Another pause followed. Certain individuals conceal their offenses, and certain individuals refute them. Tom Homan commemorates them, and that constitutes a far graver reality. The snippet was broadcast ubiquitously, distributed millions of instances over because it represented the truth. He refrained from concealing his actions, he displayed pride, and that rendered the situation far graver. A full 12 months following the session, Homan remained the border overseer, remained in authority, and remained crafting protocols. The legislative criminal suggestion had progressed absolutely nowhere, as no accusations were formally presented, with the president sheltering him. The private lawsuits remained years away from a conclusion. He intended to contest everything, prolong the process, and would likely never face incarceration, never forfeit his position, and never encounter judicial repercussions. However, he forfeited an alternative possession. He transformed into the individual who damaged minors for all time. Within every publication, every visual recording, and every reference, he was known as Tom Homan, the designer of Family Division. He was not recognized as the border overseer, not the immigration enforcement chief, and not a law execution specialist, but rather the individual who divided domestic units, who strolled past perishing minors, who benefited financially from confinement, and who fabricated facts under a solemn vow. That represented his true identity presently, and it represented who he would perpetually remain. His digital encyclopedia entry opened with those facts. His ultimate memorial piece would open with those facts, and historical texts would solely memorialize exactly that. 24 deceased minors, 1,401 divided minors, and thousands bearing trauma constituted his lasting inheritance. His legacy was not boundary protection nor deterrence, but merely verified brutality, which he had declared he would repeat on camera, under a solemn vow and with pride. Maria Santos received an inquiry regarding her thoughts concerning Homan remaining in authority. "He removed my boy, he damaged him, and he displays pride in the action, asserting he would repeat it." She retrieved her mobile device, displaying the image from June 5, 2018. "This artifact will outlast him, it will outlast me, and for eternity, individuals will recognize he was present. He listened to me plead, and he took zero action." She tucked the mobile device away. That constitutes his penalty, not incarceration, not currency, merely the facts, eternally chronicled, eternally observable, and eternally belonging to him. The relatives persisted in appearing at every gathering, every function, and every broadcast, equipped with pictures, equipped with narratives, and serving as mute witnesses. They were not furious, not hostile, merely present, rendering it impossible for him to forget. Meanwhile, Homan persisted in his defense, persisted in asserting he was accurate, and persisted in doubling his commitment, which merely validated Crockett's assertion that he had acquired zero knowledge, that he experienced zero regret, and that he would unquestionably repeat the entire process. That represents precisely how historical records will memorialize him, not as the unyielding individual who fortified the boundary, but as the arrogant tyrant who damaged minors and beamed regarding the action, eternally chronicled within legislative testimony, within pictures, within visual recordings, and within his personal phrasing, marking the session where the tyrant encountered an equal force and suffered defeat, not within a tribunal, not concerning authority, but concerning the facts.